The City Council for the City of Petoskey for January 8th, 2024. And I ask that you rise with me for the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call first.
Moore. Present. Fields.
Here.
Wagner.
Here.
Walker. Present. Murphy.
Present. I had to do that because you get to do it to me quite often, so I had to call you out on it. Little tit for tat, hey? It's all good. Next is the oaths of office. It's administration of oaths of office for the city council elect.
So Tina and Brian, you come up front, you can stand right there because you might have already preferred. And then just raise your right hand, please. Do you solemnly swear that you will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of Michigan, that you will in all respects observe the provisions of the city charter and the ordinances of the city of Petoskey, and that you will faithfully discharge the duties of the office to which you were elected in and for the city of Petoskey, county of Emmett, and state of Michigan, according to the best of your ability, so help you God?
I will.
You have to sign. Read what you sign, remember, you're an attorney though.
Thank you for that advice, Mayor.
Just giving you the advice you give me.
Right above your seat. I can change it to Christine if you want, whatever.
One of those days,
Yeah.
And Tina.
I learned today. Humor gets you a lot.
Into that.
Right on the dot.
Once you come in, you can't leave, that guy's. Thank you, Sarah. And congratulations, Tina and Brian, on another year. I don't think we need a group picture because the same group was here last year, okay? So we'll move forward. Next is the consent agenda and its adoption of a proposed resolution that would approve the following: the December 18th, 2024 regular session city council meeting minutes, as well as acknowledge a receipt of certain transactions that have occurred since December 18th, 2023. There is an amended agenda that is sitting at your desk. Minutes, I'm sorry. Please take a look at it. I believe you all have. If you have any questions. Mr. Moore.
So thank you for these corrections, first of all. But I had one more, and it was under public comment, which is on the front page of the corrected version. And it's literally the very last sentence on that page about public comment. And after it says, heard from those opposed to the use of ARPA and grant funds for snowmaking equipment. So that is different than my memory. And my memory is oftentimes wrong. But my memory was that we had a letter from Ms. Dwan, and that the opposition was to the use of ARPA and grant funds for the roof over the skating rink. So I am wondering if my colleagues remember it that same way or if I got that wrong.
Council, do you remember how it went, Mr. Shields?
I confirm that was my understanding of the comments, and it's actually in the minutes approved 2023 budget amendments. It's correct there where it says inquired if increased expenditures. Look, this is where council members were inquiring based off of Mr. Wan's comments. The last sentence, inquired if increased expenditures impact fund balance and confirmed that no ARPA funds are being used for winter sports park roof, windows and doors. That was, I agree with Mr. Moore. That was my understanding of Mr. Wan's comments.
Sarah, if does the record reflect otherwise, or do you have any?
I mean, I guess it's what,
How would you
Guys
like it to
prefer.
read? How would you like
I
it
mean,
to
if you
read
want
on the
to change
first
in the
page?
what comments you can.
You want to change it on the first page or on public comment? Mr. Moore, Mr. Shield,
I think if I may, that just where it says snowmaking equipment, cross that off and in place put
windows,
winter sports park roof, windows and doors.
okay. Council, are you good with that substitution? Okay, so Sarah, so take out and where it funds for windows, roof, and doors.
But for my part, I just defer to whatever it said in the letter, and I don't have that in front of me right now.
I don't either.
Yeah,
Mr. Wagner.
Said that. I'm remembering also when Kendall stood up and he was asked a question about ARPA funds and what they went for. He clarified it, which was later. So,
Yeah,
so there were a couple references to ARPA that night.
right. So are you good with this then, or you want different? Good for the change? Got it, Sarah? Anything else, council? If not, I'm looking for a motion.
I'm happy to make the motion relative to the minutes as amended contained in what was provided to us and the amendment that we just made on the record, along with the check register that follows.
Support. I have a motion from Ms. Demore and a second from Mr. Wagner. I'll go to Sarah Beck for roll.
Demore,
Aye.
Wagner,
Yes.
Shield.
Yes.
Walker.
Yes.
Murphy.
Yes, my motion passes 5-0. Next is the opportunity of public comment. That's your opportunity to speak to council at this time. Full name, full address, and you can address council at this time. Is there anyone who wishes to speak? Sir.
Yes.
Ryan Charles, here on behalf of Jim Mead, MB Petoskey LLC. I'm an attorney in town. My address is 109 Howard Street, Petoskey, Michigan, if you need that.
Your name again?
First name is Ryan, last name is Charles.
Ryan Charles, okay.
And these comments are with respect to the resolution, I believe y'all are considering tonight, with respect to placing a cap on the number of short-term rental licenses.
Okay,
As I mentioned, my client Jimmy MB Petoskey is the owner of 212 West Mitchell Street, just over the bridge. It's the property for some of you long time, you may remember that's where Nation
The button on your microphone, please.
Pardon me.
Hit the bar that's on your mic.
There we go. Okay, not a problem. Sorry about that.
Is this you representing somebody legally?
Yes, I'm here on behalf to provide comments on behalf of Mr. Meath and MB Petoskey for the council's consideration. It's 212 West Mitchell Street. It's for some of you longtime residents may recall.
You're not going to get comments from council or staff on this issue because it's gone to a petition. Is this the same address or different address?
I don't, this is not, yeah, this is just with respect,
Go on.
this is with respect to the resolution, I believe, that's being considered generally tonight. So, yep, I'm just providing some context as far as that's all.
I'm sorry. I
Yeah.
cut you off. Want to make sure
Yeah.
we knew what we were talking about.
Fair enough.
Clarification.
Yeah, no, thank you for clarifying. In any event, though, this is the property that formerly housed Flowers by Nature's Garden years ago, if that rings a bell for some of you. So just 4 points that we would ask that you consider with respect to the resolution to cap the number of STR licenses. Point one is just that the cap should be in line and consistent with our neighboring communities' populations pro rata. So take, for example, Boyne City, municipal population, 3,850. My understanding is they've authorized 130 licenses. So that's approximately 3.4% of the population licensed to population. Charlevoix, 3.2% licensed to population percent. Harbor Springs, which I think we all recognize as one of the more restrictive communities and probably most similarly situated to Petoskey, 5.6%. And as I understand the current number that's been discussed for Petoskey, 40 total licenses, that's at 0.67%. So way below what any of our neighboring communities have allocated as far as short-term rental licenses. And so my point is, I think that the city should maintain consistency with similarly situated surrounding communities. Otherwise, we're missing an opportunity to encourage development to beautify the city with respect to short-term rental properties, as well as increasing the tax base, right? As some of these properties are appropriated and used for short-term rentals. Point two, I think that some distinction should be made whether a property is being repurposed as an existing single or multifamily property, i.e. that's removing an existing available housing from the otherwise available long-term housing pool, okay? So taking a property that's currently being used for single or multifamily versus properties that are currently not being used as single or multifamily, and or a property where there's new development, where a structure is being built for purposes of short-term rental. In those situations, again, that's not adding to the issue of the housing crisis, because again, we're not taking from properties that are already being used and available for long-term housing. We're actually creating new housing, albeit yes, initially they'll be used for short-term rentals, but we're also developing and basically adding more dwelling units to the city, which I think everybody recognizes a good thing if they don't already exist. The third point is that, as I understand the cap that's being considered currently, it's a global cap that applies across all districts in the city. So whatever number you settle on, whether it be 30, 40, 100, that number currently is being allocated against every license. And I think it would make sense to somehow allocate within those licenses within the individual business districts. So for example, you have a cap within the central business district of X number of licenses. You have a cap within the B3 business district of X number of licenses, cap within the B2, so on and so forth, within all these business districts where, as I understand, short-term rental licenses are going to be authorized once the moratorium is lifted. I don't think it makes sense to have a one-size-fits-all across the city cap where theoretically, if it's first come, first serve, every one of those licenses could end up being allocated in the short-term business district. I don't think that's good public policy. I think that there should be some distinction amongst the various districts, business districts within the city. And then final point is whether the existing grandfathered residential licenses will count towards the cap. I understand that there's a number of those licenses that will basically be allowed to remain until the ownership changes or until they're not renewed. And because residential is ultimately going to be going away, right? Once those licenses are either not renewed or the property ownership changes, our position would be make the cap as far as the business district where those licenses are going to be allowed moving forward. Don't use those grandfather licenses that are eventually going away to count against that cap. And so we would just ask that you consider those points as you consider this resolution to cap the number of short-term licenses in the city. I think it makes sense, and we don't dispute that a cap of some kind makes sense, but we think that we just ask that you consider those points that I made tonight when you consider what that looks like once it's finally resolved and you vote on it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Anyone else want to speak to council?
I was gonna hold this until we talked about the cap, but since it seems relevant right now. Okay, I know, I've timed it. Mallory Powell, 215 West Mitchell Street. Okay, so it's a really great night to be here because my comments start with you all took an oath of office. I do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of this state, and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of the office to the best of my ability. With that established, I wanted to ask council this. Why are we dedicating time tonight to discussing a cap for STRs made by a resolution when we are already aware that it is not lawful and cannot be enforced? To bring everyone up to speed, on both December 21st and 23rd, I sent emails alerting council that any attempt to regulate or amend an existing ordinance via a resolution is a clear violation of Michigan law. This includes not only this cap, but the moratorium from July 10th and its extension on December 18th. For clarity's sake, let's look at a few sources. Petoskey City Charter, Section 6.2, Resolutions and Ordinances states, resolutions shall be official actions of the city council in the form of a motion pertaining to internal affairs or concerns of the city. Acts that carry a penalty for violation shall be an ordinance. At the state level, the Charter Township Act 395 of 1947, Section 42.20, number 1 reads, a resolution shall be limited to matters required or permitted to be done by a resolution and to matters pertaining to the internal affairs or concerns of the township government. Any other act of the township board or any act imposing a sanction for the violation of the act shall be by an ordinance. If that's not enough, let's move on to legal doctrine. For this, I'll quote Michigan State University in an article quite appropriately related to this called "A Zoning Moratorium Should Be Done with Caution." It says, and I quote, under the doctrine of legislative equivalency, an ordinance can only be amended or suspended by another ordinance, meaning a moratorium can only be enacted by the adoption of an ordinance. While some Michigan communities have attempted to enact a moratorium by resolution, it is well-established case law in Michigan that an ordinance cannot be suspended by a resolution. Resolutions are essentially fancy declarations. They're not intended to be used for anything outside of internal functions or the business of government. They are not enforceable laws. They remove the due process of Petoskey citizens. There have been lawyers and experts present at all of these meetings. We have contended repeatedly with an abundance of evidence to support that those lawyers and experts were not accurately representing the full scope and context of the local zoning ordinances or Michigan law. Considering this, I can perhaps accept that to the best of your ability may mean that you enforce these resolutions in the past after having been improperly advised. That said, as of December 21st, 23rd, and here again today, you have been provided with a relevant law to correct that. So why are we still here attempting to rule by resolution and violate the due process of Petoskey's voters? How can you possibly take this conversation seriously knowing it's not lawful and that it is a violation of your oath? And while we're on the subject, let's go back to the moratorium. For over 6 months, the city has been enforcing a resolution as law, and not just any type of law, a law that would regulate private owners and what they are able to do with properties that they purchased and paid taxes for. As a result, we and others have suffered significant damages, and we have certainly had sanctions and violations applied to us. In fact, here's a ticket that I got back in September. And not only is this an overreach of power under a resolution, as we've just established, but this is a waste of taxpayer resources as our business was not even open at the time. And there are others. Property sales were stopped because the city refused to transfer grandfathered licenses with the sale, which, to be clear, is also a violation of Michigan law. Non-conforming use goes with the property and not with the owner. Other owners were issued tickets which they fought in court. Some were forced to cancel thousands of dollars in future bookings under the moratorium, and I'm certain there are others. This is all to say that it is your duty as elected representatives of the voters of Petoskey to change course. And in this context, and all of our previous arguments that council may have not represented the law correctly, perhaps we should take another look at 793 and 794 to make sure they're properly updated to be in accordance with the intent of local zoning and state laws. Lastly, to all current STR owners, prospective owners, and lawfully grandfathered properties with regard to new applications, as we filed an intent to petition pursuant to MCL 12534 2402. Despite what the city is attempting to enforce and what Ms. Stowers represented at the last meeting, new amendments are not enacted as law, and the previous ordinance and process remain in place until January 17th. As such, I would encourage you to all get your application submitted if you met the previous criteria. I can attach that the old application for license will be accepted. In fact, this is a receipt from last Friday, January 5th, where I did just that. You can obtain a copy of the previous application for license, which was removed from Petoskey's website, by contacting our city clerk under the Freedom of Information Act. Thank you for your time.
Anyone else with the city council?
Go to city manager updates.
Someone just raised that. You've got somebody raising your hand right there.
Where? I couldn't see you. Come on up. Sorry.
Okay, I just raised it, so. Nancy Johnson, 125 West Lake Street. And
Wait, start over. Start over.
Nancy Johnson, 125 West Lake Street. Yeah. So I guess sitting here, it's upsetting to me that this is such a angst, you know. I have a short-term rental property. And I just wish we could make this work. A couple of thoughts. And I can see where both our previous speakers have come from. One would be, and I thought this is the way it was a couple of years ago because I owned a property in a commercially zoned area that was became a short-term rental with no problem. It was in a commercially zoned area. So number one, in a commercially zoned area, why not open it up to whoever wants to have a short-term rental? It's already zoned commercial. I will say my one big thing as a landlord and a short-term rental owner is this. I don't think that people who have short-term rental properties should be responsible for the lack of rental housing in the area. I don't think that's fair at all. But secondly, I think that, for example, in RM2 zoning areas where it's multiply zoned, why not open it up to short-term rental properties? When you get to residential, that's touchy because people buy in the residential area, I'm assuming because they want to be in a residential area. They don't want, you know, tenants next door, and I understand that. And I would say maybe they aren't to be allowed to do that, you know, simply because of the zoning. So I guess I'm trying to say is I wish there was a way to work this out with without so much conflict. I think it can happen. And even though I have a short-term rental property that happens to be in an RM2 zone area, we've been doing it for probably 8 years now. There are a lot of changes with the ordinances, et cetera, which, you know, we're working through. But, you know, I'll accept whatever the city does, to be honest with you, because people think that it's such a moneymaker, you know, and you know, for us, it's just basically a situation where we like renting properties in the summer, or our properties, because we like to be gone in the winter to see our grandchildren, et cetera, et cetera. We did, I think I mentioned this before, long-term rentals for 40 years in the city. So if the council, if it's pretty much fair for everybody and they say, oh, you can't do it anymore, I'm okay with that. But I just think there's got to be a way to work this out. You know, as far as the numbers thing, I know the attorney mentioned some numbers and that makes sense. And, you know, the other person mentioned, and very well spoken, mentioned a lot of legal things, you know, that we should consider. But I think, you know, there has to be a way to resolve this. And all I wanted to say was, number one, I think RM2 should be open to however many rentals people want to do, because it's already zoned that way, more or less. Number two, commercial for sure. And I guess with the residential zoning, have to work on that a bit. But I think it's fair to the people who bought in the residential area with no intention of having multiple family units next door or whatever, that it's fair to them because of the zoning to say no short-term rentals. Thank you.
Anyone else wish to speak to council?
John Powell, 215 West Mitchell Street. I'd just like to note that any suggesting or mention or equivalizing of the aspect of a legal matter and an election proceeding, which is our petition, is categorically unacceptable.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak to council? There being none, we'll go to city manager's updates. It's sitting in front of you.
Thank you, Mayor. First meeting of the month, we want to celebrate and recognize staff birthdays and work anniversaries for the month of January. We have a number of staff members celebrating birthdays. Ben Carlson, our school resource officer in public safety, January 6th, John Hummel, Parks and Rec, January 7th, Gordon Standish, water, wastewater, January 8th, Tony Belmonte, code enforcement officer, January 9th, Dave Schultz, public safety, January 10th, Drew Levison, electric department, January 19th, and Connor Kish, public safety, January 22nd. Work anniversaries this month, Jim Whitney, Parks and Rec, 24 years with the city, Fred Hellick, public safety, 24 years as well. Steve Sparks, Public Works, 24 years. I'm always excited to see, when folks get to that point, 20 plus years of service, that's pretty impressive. So certainly something to celebrate. Brad Cooper, water, wastewater, 22 years. Lieutenant Mikulski, public safety, 20 years. Ricky Howard, Public Works, 19 years. Joe Conti, Building and Grounds, 17 years. Val Meyerson, our library director, 9 years. Jason Fate, Public Works, 5 years. So congratulations to all of our staff. Public meetings this coming up. Parks and Rec obviously is meeting right next door. They may be, well, they're still in there, looks like. Tonight at 6. Downtown Management Board next week. Planning Commission next week on Tuesday and Wednesday respectively, both at 6 p.m. And then City Council, this is obviously an unusual month for us just because we pushed our first meeting of the month down to tonight. So we will be back together on Monday, January 22nd at 6 p.m. A few project status updates to bring you up to speed on. The lofts at Lumber Square is obviously an ongoing project. We were last told that they may start the footers, excavating footers yet this month in January. So that is hopefully going to proceed even through the course of the winter. Michigan Maple Block, they were just awarded a letter of interest for CRP. This is a loan through MEDC of $2 million. And just to be very clear, this is a loan between Great Lakes Capital and MEDC. The city has no part in that. We're not a signatory of that. So that's something that Great Lakes Capital and MEDC are working through currently. Also an update to Michigan Maple Block. I was just alerted by the Great Lakes Capital, by the developer, that they have worked out an agreement with the Darrow Oil folks to relocate the above ground fuel tanks. As you may recall, that was a point of concern by MSHDA. Potentially there'd have to be a blast wall constructed between the tanks and the development. Great Lakes Capital has worked out an agreement with the Darrow Oil company to get those tanks relocated. 424 Emmett Street, you may recall that Oprah that was approved over a year ago. They just received a $878,000 letter of interest. This is a CRP grant for that project. So they're working through their due diligence to get all the documents back to MEDC for that project. And then the Little Traverse Wheelway, we are continuing, this is a slope restoration project. We're continuing meeting with Baird really every other week. We skipped one in December due to the holiday, but they have received LiDAR mapping from MDOT, and that mapping really looks at stripping out the foliage, the trees, so it's kind of ground penetrating minus the trees. So that's useful mapping in this project. They just completed that and Baird has that mapping in place. They're also working on a wave energy beach model, looking at the wave action along that stretch of the wheelway that has collapsed. So that also will be good data to have as we move forward. So again, we are meeting on a bi-weekly basis, having conference calls with all of our stakeholders. And we'll be moving through the process of permitting through Eagle and all the different agencies throughout this project. One thing I wanted to brief you on as well, as you may recall, I did submit a letter of interest for the MSHDA CHILL grant. CHILL stands for CDBG, Improving Local Livability. I did that back on December 11th. We were notified just before the holiday that we were invited to formally submit an application for these funds. This would be a $500,000 grant. And this would be for homeowner improvement projects. And this is really geared for funds for reconstructing or improving permanent single-family residential housing for incomes at or below 80% area median income. So we will be working on that over the next month. We have to have this packaged up. Application submission is February 12th. Currently, there's no match requirement. Obviously, anytime you're submitting an application, anytime you can sweeten that application, that's certainly something that may be beneficial for us. But as I submitted the LOI, I did not put a match in there, and certainly that's something we can discuss at a future meeting if that's a desire of council moving forward. So those are my updates. Happy to answer your questions.
Council questions for city manager, Ms. Walker.
Thank you, Shane, for an excellent report. I did have a couple of questions about the grants that both the Emmett Street Oprah property on the corner of Michigan and Emmett, as well as Michigan Maple Block property. So those were something that the developers themselves applied for,
Yes.
and they were both granted the money.
So they have LOIs,
Letter of intent.
letter of intent, so they'll need to, depending on, I believe the Michigan Maple Block, because of the size of the award, $2 million, that'll have to go before the Michigan Strategic Fund Board, which is the MEDC governing body. The $878,000 LOI for the Oprah for 424 would be administratively approved and would not need to go to MSF board. So both they're working through both of those submittals currently. But that is between the owner / developer and MEDC.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Anyone else? Mr. Moore.
Not a question, just thank you, Shane, for anticipating my question about the loan.
No.
Mayor, I do have another question. If I may.
Question.
Okay, go ahead.
I was involved with the Housing Council 9-10 years, a couple $1 million was put in. One of them was $500,000 that went into Emmett Street in a similar process like this about
PNG.
5 years ago. It was 50% forgiven if you lived in that for 5 years. There was no interest. You didn't pay for the loan until you died or moved or sold the house. Is that this same type of loan, or how is it structured for? Will individuals have to pay this back, or will this be?
So you're talking about through the CHILL program?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the minimum assistance is 1,000, maximum is 40,000 per unit is how they've set it up. So essentially the let me read it right off their term sheet here. CDBG assistance of 10,000 or more shall be zero interest, zero payment loan, forgivable after 5 years. Loan shall be secured by a second mortgage, forgiven in full at the end of 5 years. Other loan characteristics, mortgage shall include the full amount of assistance. The mortgage and mortgage note are between the homeowner and Mishta. Yeah, so I think that, so it's essentially zero interest, zero payment loan forgivable after 5 years. The key thing is they have to meet income guidance and,
You have to own your own home.
yep, and have to be at or below the 80% AMI. Likely what I would seek guidance on, because this is a fairly significant lift for staff, I would like to secure the services of a third-party administrator.
Please.
I'm not sure who that may be, but we could seek proposals. And maybe you guys have some ideas as well.
We'll come up with somebody, we'll give you that feedback.
Yeah, that's great.
I know when we did this 5 years ago, one of the problems was it was gonna be the Emmett Street corridor. And we found that we had difficulties finding the residents that own the home and have any equity in it that we could work with. So we had to expand it over to Bridge Street, Fulton. We have to expand it. So is this citywide?
Yeah, it wasn't my intent to disqualify any wards particularly. I think we have challenging areas in all 4 wards that I think we need to walk alongside folks
Okay.
with. So yes, this would be citywide.
Right. I think it's great that we get an administrator for this. That's how it worked in the past. It
Mhm.
seemed to work out well. Because it is a lot of footwork and a lot of work to verify verifications and stuff. You have a comment, Ms. Walker?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I think it was just along those lines as well, as whether it would be like a Northern Home CDC as a community development corporation, or like a Northern Michigan Community Action Agency. That would be one of the 2 potential agencies that would, I would think, facilitate that. I don't know if there would be a third party. And then also beg the question about, I just had a question about that, the property on Bridge Street, that Northern Home CDC did build 2 relatively new homes, and I didn't know if anybody had a status update on that project in particular, Shane, if there was something that's.
No, but I will reach out to them and have that for our next meeting.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other comments? Moving along is appointments. It's the election of a city council person to serve as mayor pro tem as required by the city charter provisions. I had a city council member ask if it would be better to pass this around so that other people have the opportunity. And so therefore, one person did express an interest. So I'm taking to you and would ask that you consider Tina DeMoore for this position of mayor pro tem. Do I have a motion?
Well, I'm not making a motion.
Ms. Walker?
Thank you, Mayor. I'll be happy to make a motion to propose that Tina DeMoore be the 2024 mayor pro tem.
Do I have a second? Mr. Wagner. I have a motion from Ms. Walker and a second from Mr. Wagner. Do you wish to speak or can we vote?
No, I just wanted to say, to make clear that this is no reflection on the services of Mr. Wagner, who's done a great job. But when I served on the school board, we did shift this around, and I just thought that that could be beneficial. So you've done a great job.
So. Go to Sarah Beck for roll.
Walker,
Yes.
Wagner.
Yes.
Demore,
Aye.
Shields.
Yes.
Murphy.
Yes, motion passes 5-0. Brian, I'd like to thank you for serving as mayor pro tem in my position, I think once, twice a year, maybe. You've had the opportunity and you've fulfilled it well, so thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity. Tina, welcome aboard. Next, old business, the adoption of a proposed resolution that would adopt limits to the number of short-term rental licenses for 2024 and 25 licensees. And I'm going to turn it over to City Manager Horn for possible suggestions. I know you've talked to the city attorney.
Yeah, we've had a number of conversations on this to prepare us for where we're at currently. This really becomes a kind of a business decision of city council at this point. I put a resolution in that's kind of blank for you to fill in. This first year is a little cumbersome in the fact that we have existing licenses that need to be considered. So that's why I separated it out, existing and then new, and then going forward into 25, they will all merge into one cap per se, if that's the desire of city council. But as planning commission has put forth a recommendation of 40, I think they were looking at, the number of housing units that we have in the city of Petoskey is just over 3,500. They were kind of basing their decision on looking at, the number of housing units that are in the city and trying to kind of put some rationale behind that, based on that. But we do have, our city planner, John Michelangeli, online, as well as our city attorney, Rhonda Stowers. So feel free to ask questions if you're prepared to make any sort of suggestions or motions on this. Would certainly entertain that.
City Attorney Stowers, could you give us your opinion on this motion as it is right now?
I guess I don't understand the councilman's question. It's more of a political or a judgment call of the city based on the needs and requirements of the city. I know there was some comments earlier about percentages of other communities, which may or may not be reflective of the city of Petoskey's needs. I would defer to the planning commission as having a good understanding of what the housing situation looks like and what they've seen in terms of what might or might not be appropriate. I know that there is, at least a recognized housing crisis that's been discussed many times in various meetings that would suggest that should be a factor in your decision. But it's really council's call as to what an appropriate number would be. I would agree that at the beginning, it's appropriate to look at existing licenses versus new licenses, with that number being adjusted in, say, April, once you have a look of what that landscape looks like. Because at that point, everyone that has an existing is either going to renew or not. And when that happens, then you'll know how many of those licenses might become available maybe for the business sectors that we've talked about. So I would defer to the wisdom of council on this issue.
Thank you. Council, Mr. Shields. Thank you, Mayor. I will just venture some comments to get us going on discussion on this. I've in previous meetings have suggested increasing it. I appreciate the staff to provide us with the correspondence of neighboring communities and their percentages based off of total housing. If we jump to a 2% cap of our based off our total housing, we'd still be the lowest percentage in neighboring communities. That would be by math 70, a cap of 70 for total, a total cap. And I say that based off, given that our current zoning ordinance we've recently passed is protecting our desired goal of preserving housing units in the community. So given that ordinance, given that these are per unit, and so a particular short-term rental structure could have multiple units, and those will each count towards the cap, is my understanding. Mm-hmm. I feel that safe, or I feel good suggesting throwing out 70 as the initial discussion point, and curious what you all think.
Mr. Moore.
Oh.
Well, you looked over at me.
So I respectfully disagree. I appreciate this information that's been provided to us on other communities, but find it totally irrelevant, frankly. Every one of these communities has established a model directly suited to their particular circumstances. And that is our job here too, to establish a model that's suited to our circumstances. I'm a fan of evidence-based decision-making. So in response to constituent input we've had about lodging shortages, and to inform our decision-making on STR caps, I reached out to the Petoskey Area Visitors Bureau to obtain data regarding visitor lodging, which City Manager Horn has now shared with all of us. In response, the Bureau provided a 3-year average of traditional lodging occupancy rates in the Petoskey area, which demonstrate a 55% annual occupancy rate. Similarly, the data demonstrates that the 2023 occupancy rate for Petoskey area short-term rentals was 54%. While this data is for the Petoskey area, I'm advised that the data for the city of Petoskey closely mirrors this evidence-based information, which clearly demonstrates there is no lodging shortage as suggested. While there certainly may be times when a person can't find a place to stay, which happens, as an example, the soccer tournament, these are points of compression, and they're estimated to be maybe 10 to 15 days per year, not constituting a lodging shortage. Additionally, I'd mention on the record that Homes to Suites currently has underway 90+ units, along with other possible area developments. So bottom line, there is nothing in the data points to support a lodging or STR shortage in Petoskey. Conversely, and as we have previously discussed, the Bowen Housing Market Summary clearly indicates that an overall housing gap in Emmett County of 3,370 units, including specifically a gap of 865 rental units in Emmett County. Since it's clear that there is no need for additional STRs and that adding them would actually potentially have a negative economic impact on existing traditional lodging and existing licensed STRs, I will not support a cap higher than 40, which is already an increase of 7 licenses beyond those currently existing. And with due respect to the constituent comments we received this evening, given the evidence in the Bowen report, I would strongly urge people in the community with a property or properties appropriate for residential rentals to make them available for long-term workforce housing. This will ensure that visitors to the area and residents will have workers in restaurants, shops, grocery stores, healthcare, etc., to provide essential services. Thank you.
Anyone else wish to speak? Mr. Wagner.
Yes, thanks. Well, thanks, Mayor. We tabled this in part because you weren't with us last time.
Yes.
So we wanted to make sure you were.
Online listening.
I know you were. And the comment I made at the time still holds true. I support a planning commission at the 40 cap. And knowing that if we get to a point, we hear from the city clerk, we hear from others that there's a high demand that we miscalculated, we can review that and change it.
Anyone else wish to speak? Ms. Walker.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks for the opportunity. I know that as we present the data that we see here in terms of our total housing stock and percentages of, what potential short-term rentals would be considering our housing stock. But so we've established that we are protecting our rental housing stock in a variety of ways. One of the ways that we're doing that is by implementing this to be as part of a B2 or B3 zoning possibility. So there will be no further development of short-term rentals in the residential neighborhoods, even though there are many residential neighborhoods that are actually zoned as part of the CBD district or are zoned on the periphery of B2 or B3. I'm curious because when you're looking at a full picture of housing stock and you're generating data of percentages, but you're moving away from housing short-term rentals in traditional home structures, I find that those numbers get a little bit confusing. And then to further restrict within those business districts who can or can't and have a standalone law that all of a sudden short-term rentals are not allowed on the first floor of Central Business District B2, B3, mixed use, et cetera, it really muddies the water in terms of understanding for the general public, where are we going to actually allow these things? Where is the yes? So that being considered, I think that I am open to the idea of increasing the number of short-term rentals. I'm not sure if 70 is the right number or 50 or 40, but I think there should be a general trajectory towards allowing more, considering that we have already made lots of limitations. And it looks like, okay, the city of Petoskey is allowing 0.5% of their rental housing stock for short-term rentals. So considering that there's different definitions of where these are going to be allowed, I think in terms of the help of clarity of where the yes is, I would be open to perhaps suggesting more than the 40 unit cap.
Mr. Shields.
Thank you, Ms. Walker. And Mr. Moore, I appreciate you bringing up those concerns, and I share those. I share the desire and the goal of protecting our housing stock and the 865 rental units, make sure we have more of those and maintain those and have more of those. I think what Ms. Walker said, the yes attitude comes into play here, in that by restricting to, I think 40 is an attitude character thing for Petoskey that I also think has ramifications, impacts for the long-term character of our community, and that increasing it to 70 or 55 is an in between, shows some sort of yes attitude to working with this industry that does provide some diversity of places to stay, and so you have the hotels, you have and you have someone's short-term rental. So add some diversity. I guess I'm not saying that there's any fear in anything, but I'm saying I don't have fear in that by increasing it a little bit, it's gonna hurt things. I guess that's where I'm open to moving it up to 7 I don't feel like that opens the door at all. I understand. What I'm hearing you saying is why open the door at all? Is that correct?
Mr. Moore.
What I'm saying is that as a body, we should make decisions based on evidence. And what the evidence tells us is that with a 54 to 55% occupancy rate, respectfully, it's like throwing a dart at a board. We're already increasing by 7 properties when it's clear that the existing properties are only at 54 to 55% occupancy. That doesn't make sense to me. So if we're interested in existing economic interests, we should be looking at the traditional lodging and the licensed STRs that are already in place. They're only at 54 to 55% occupancy. To me, that doesn't warrant selecting a higher number. I mean, we're already increasing by 7 without any demonstrated need for an increase at this point in time. That's my perspective. So I would be making the decision based on that data. Thank you.
Mr. Wong.
Thank you. My comment, I guess, is that my understanding is we don't have a cap today, and we only have 33 who've applied and are licensed.
34.
And so we're talking about creating a cap.
Yeah.
So the lid is off today, essentially, and we only have 33. So, is that correct? Yeah.
Sarah.
That we don't currently have a cap?
Correct. No cap.
I don't have a problem with staying at 40, and here's why. We can always go and revisit this if it starts getting pushed. It's a lot like our licenses for alcohol, where you have those smaller licenses that are non-saleable after you leave the business. You know about those? I don't know if you were here then or not. We approved, I believe it was 6 of those license availabilities. Okay, and we came back and people want, oh, give 20 out, give 20 of these liquor opportunities for the city out to businesses. And we said, let's go with 6. And if they fill up, we can come back and increase it. It's the same as the ADUs. We set a limit of 10 for ADUs. At this point, there's been what, 1? 2? Okay. This or this, okay? That many out of the 10. And there were people that wanted 20 of them. And it was like, let's start low. And if it becomes a driving interest, we can come back and revisit it. And we have done that in the past on other subjects where we've come back and said, well, that filled up. Let's go on to the next. The 55% fill rate of what's existing now gives me concerns that if we increase it, we are going to be hurting those people that are doing short-term rentals. I don't have a problem with short-term rentals in the central business district. In areas such as that, I think that's great. It gets people downtown, restaurants, bars, shopping. It keeps them there, or it doesn't keep them there, but it allows them the opportunity to live there. And I think right now I'm happy with 40, with the opportunity to come and revisit it if we wish in the future. I also want to say that the Planning Commission did homework. And I believe it was facts-based that 40 was their suggestion. And I feel without good evidence of why to increase it, I will be supporting 40 at this time with the opportunity to come back. I have no problem revisiting this. Mr. Moore.
So if I could, I just have a question for Ms. Stowers while we have her on the line. When I looked at the resolution as it's crafted for 2024, how we've delineated out like existing licenses and new licenses. One of the questions I had when I read it, so just theoretically, if we have 33 existing licenses, just for point of discussion, and 7 new licenses, as things move forward, just in the event, let's say that some of those folks with existing licenses didn't renew or whatever, then that would have an impact on new licenses and effectively change the number of new licenses available to be greater than 7, if I'm understanding this correctly. So if we enter this resolution the way it is, whatever numbers we fill in, how effectively can that new license number change, because that's not addressed in this resolution? Thank you.
Ms. Stowers, answer that for us.
I sure can. And it was my thought when we were looking at this, rather than trying to figure out how to morph over, for example, like I said, at the end of March, the beginning of April, we will know how many existing license holders chose to renew. We will know exactly what that number is. And at that point, at the first council meeting in April, council could revisit this resolution and say, okay, now that we know what that number is, we're going to change the cap so that we can allocate the unused licenses, to the extent there are unused licenses, over to the new licenses, and allow so that the max number will be 40, and it's not licenses are being held in reserve at that point in April. And that would really be my suggestion, is that council come back and revisit the numbers in April when we do have a very clear landscape as to the existing versus new.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions, council? Otherwise, if you want to move this on to a vote or a discussion beyond that, I need a motion in a second. Otherwise, more discussion. Mr. Shields.
Just a really quick comment. I appreciate this conversation and the time. Your comment, Mr. Moore, about data driven and making data driven decision. I respect that. But I also feel like this is the data that you pulled out and provided to us is one part of this conversation, or one part. So there's no data on the positive economic impact of short-term rentals, not only to tax base, as one commenter made, but also to livelihoods for people that reside in our area. So I want to say I do respect that, and that does impact. I'm weighing that. I also say it's not the full picture, and no disrespect to the planning commission. Planning commission is I say my suggestion of a higher rate is not showing disrespect to the work they put in. I just feel like there might be more data points that we are not able to consider, and part of that goes back to then to, without that, an attitude perspective of the city and wanting to suggest a little bit higher cap. Thank you.
Motion.
Please.
I would make a motion to establish a cap of 40, which would be delineated between 33 existing licenses and, for now, 7 new licenses, pending that April meeting when adjustments might be made.
Do I have a second? I have a motion from Ms. Demore and a second from Mr. Wagner. Any other discussion, council? I turn it to public comment for their opportunity. I see you. Come on up. Come on up.
A few comments and a few questions. Mallory Powell, 215 West Mitchell Street.
Thank you.
Sorry, I figured by now you know who I am.
You're still.
Yes, I get it.
To follow up.
Absolutely, I get it. Councilwoman Demore, I just have a question for you about your data. Is that been weighted at all for our peak tourist season, or is that just an annual figure? Because I would say 55% if we're looking at it in an annual basis on a tourism driven economy where the vast majority of things happen during the summer months, that's probably a pretty high number of occupancy.
I'd refer you to the Petoskey Area Visitors Bureau if you'd like more information on their data.
So I would just like to point out that we should probably be rating our occupancy and our lodging crisis based on the seasons where people most travel, which would be the summer months. And I can tell you, as someone who is a longtime tourist whose business plan came out of not being able to find appropriate lodging here, that it is very, very, very hard unless you book months in advance to find any sort of accommodations, especially in Petoskey. Another question I would have, well, first of all, another comment. I appreciate hearing from Councilpersons Walker and Shields with regard to finding where the yeses. I want to be clear that, and I think I've made this point several times, it is both a misnomer and not true. STRs are not opposite of housing. They can exist simultaneously to the benefit of this community, especially when I say things about occupancy on a year-round basis. My husband and I considered offering our rental, which now has applied for a license. So actually we have 6 available, not 7. Offering out as long-term workforce housing for the 6 months in the winter, because it made more sense than opening it up at a lower rate. Those are things that I've said in the past could be incentivized. You could incentivize STR owners to also offer their long-term housing. You could incentivize owners in residential areas, if, for example, the state law came to pass, to continue with long-term housing. There are a ton of things that we can do outside of penalizing short-term rentals for an issue that they have not caused. And I do appreciate hearing that some of the people in council are trying to have a yes attitude and identify where these belong, because to be very clear, the only thing right now that is jeopardizing housing in Petoskey is the staunchness and the strictness and the inability to wiggle with your constituents with regard to the short-term rental law. There's a lawyer online right now. There's a lawyer right here. There's a petition, an election matter in front of you with regard to the what a year of work that was put in with the planning commission, zoning, with yourselves, that jeopardizes housing, not short-term rentals. And then lastly, are you planning to enforce this cap? If so, I'm asking, are you putting it in the ordinance or is it a resolution? Because it's very clearly established that you cannot enforce a resolution. And I know that because the moratorium, which is hypothetically active right now, I was able to apply under the old license on it.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak to council? Please.
Nancy Johnson, 125 West Lake Street. Just to the point, of short-term rentals replacing hotels, et cetera. It's a whole different niche. It's a whole different market. It's a whole different option for travelers. And I think I mentioned before, but if you were going to visit your grandchildren, your relatives, whatever, I'm going to say, I don't know how many people in this room have stayed at a VRBO or an Airbnb somewhere. I have. And I will say, fortunately, it's always been a great experience. It's been at home. We can cook. We can, live our life. Parking is close by, not, necessarily a parking lot in a hotel. And we love it. So I just want to say, if you can set that aside, it's not a competition with hotels and lodging or any of that. It's an option for people visiting our area to have a really cool place to stay in a great location town. Most hotels aren't downtown. I can't tell you how many people have said to me, we love the fact that your place is right downtown, right in walking distance to the Gaslight District, on and on and on. And I feel really good about that. So I think it's a different niche. I appreciate the licensing part and the inspections personally. I like that a lot. I like having somebody come through. This is what you need to do. This is what's code. I have no problem with that. If we have to change something, we do. I think that's a really good thing. Back to the zoning. My personal opinion. There are zones, I think I just mentioned, which allow multiple housing, commercial enterprises, whatever. I'm assuming short-term rentals would be approved. For now, unless there's something I don't know, if it's a residential area, no short-term rentals until we get this worked out with the state or whoever. So maybe I'm not up on things with that, but that's my personal opinion. And that's kind of unfortunate because I know people would like to rent out a room in their house or whatever in a residential area, but I don't think it's fair to the people who actually purchased homes in that residential area, not, knowing that there would be a business next door. I think that it's good to promote business in the area. Anyone who comes in here, if they have a new business, a new gig or whatever, has the right, to promote that and to try it out and, legally, of course. I think as far as, the 55%, of occupancy, I will say that for numerous summers, we have our kids come up. And one of the reasons I actually did this was because we couldn't find a hotel room for them that was less than $300 a night. Airbnbs, VRBOs provide a place for people to stay. And a lot of times it's reasonable, I think that's a plus. Hotels really raise the rates in the summertime. And when you have to get 2 or 3 rooms for a family, that's a lot of money. So that's one reason. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there's a new hotel going up around here. Okay. I guess my feeling is if there was such a shortage, a glut of hotel rooms, that why would they be building a new hotel here? And the other thought I had with hotels, they have rooms, right? They can convert the rooms, I'm assuming, to long-term rentals if they want to. I'm just wondering why aren't they approached, or maybe they are, why can't they convert some of their rooms to some long-term rentals for maybe singles, people, working at the hospital or whatever. I don't know if they've been approached about that, but I'm saying, well, why can't we put part of that on them? They've got all the rooms and they can do that as well, So I guess to sum it up, I appreciate what you guys do. I wouldn't want to be in your place for sure. It's kind of a new area, but I hope you give some thought to these things that are being mentioned. I think it could be worked out. I don't think we should panic about it now and maybe give it a year to see what happens. But final thing on the numbers, I think with the existing short-term rentals, eventually probably they will, they will go away and just start from ground zero with the new ones. Thanks.
Thank you, Nancy. Anyone else wish to speak to council?
Just one more brief comment. John Powell, 215 West Mitchell. Just because it's been brought up, I'd just like to underscore the distinction that's being made tonight between the services that a hotel provides and the services that short-term rentals provide. And I really felt that the scope of the conversation on that specific topic and distinction was an important one tonight.
Thank you.
To piggyback on that, there are a few things I want to mention. First of all, with regard to old short-term license versus this new short-term license, it is established in Michigan law that grandfathered uses go with the property, not with the owner. So you're not going to be able to remove any of those grandfathered licenses unless they change the use to something else. The second thing is, I resent, and I frankly feel like I've been gaslit as though I have been opposed to housing. And I have spent the last few weeks protecting housing. With regard to my husband's last comment, there is a distinction between STRs and hotels, which does not exist in the ordinance from 2014. Vacation rentals, short-term rentals are not included, defined by a resolution or otherwise. For 10 years, Petoskey has shuttered small businesses. They have issued sanctions. They have charged fees. And there is no law. Every other municipality that is fighting this law with short-term rentals has one where it's defined, not where it's defined via a loophole. And I will point out one last thing. I'm still waiting on my Freedom of Information request with regard to all of the written and verbal communication, 2014 now. We've had some difficulty getting fulfilled. But it is clear through news coverage in 2014 that vacation rentals were mentioned by name in the city council proceedings. I find it suspicious, curious, that nowhere in that law are vacation rentals mentioned. Short-term rentals. Wasn't even that you tried to use a resolution as a mechanism for that. And that's catastrophic for housing. That's why I haven't submitted my petition, by the way. Because if I did, that's catastrophic. Not to mention, the city is now incredibly exposed to every business you've shuttered, not just under the moratorium, but potentially for the last 10 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak to council? Good afternoon, evening.
Hello, my name is Diana Gwinney. The address is 212 West Mitchell. I won't take up too much time because I know you've spent a lot of time on this. I just wanted to clarify a couple of things. When our project at 212 West Mitchell started, we went to the website and looked under your zoning facts, which suggested that vacation rentals are allowed in the business district with a city license. At that time, I applied for a city license and was approved and got it back from Sarah Beck. It did not say short-term rental license. So when the tickets started coming, we were a little caught off guard and went to the city and said, okay, we'd like to apply for a license. The moratorium was in place and we were obviously shut down. So the comment was made that there's only 33 short-term license rentals and not more expected. Well, we want to, but we can't. So that's kind of point number one. The second one I would ask you to consider is you mentioned not opposing them in the central business district. Well, 212 West Mitchell sits in the general business district, still very much within walking distance, sits right next to that beautiful set of stairs down to the waterfront. So, you know, like council member Walker pointed out, you know, the line between just general and business is very gray. And so I would ask you to consider all of the business district to not just be okay, because you can walk, that's the best part of Petoskey. You can walk anywhere. And so I would just ask that that would be considered as well, not just the central business district. I think that's all I've got.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak to council at this time? Sir.
Hi, Davis LaBelle from 343 Monroe Street. First, I wanted to start off by saying thank you to all the council members. This is a thankless job most of the time, so I wanted to take the opportunity to appreciate you. These are tough decisions, very contentious issues across the country, not just in our community. So putting your necks on the line, obviously not that fun, but I appreciate you coming to some sort of resolution and decision. With that being said, to kind of touch on what Councilmember Mayor Murphy said about ADUs. I have inquired about ADUs. I'm interested in them. To echo what this gentleman, the attorney, said, you know, if we're adding housing, I don't see that being an issue with short-term rentals and the stock of what is being used as rentals. And furthermore, to be honest with you, construction costs are very high right now. So I can't necessarily rationalize spending, you know, $300,000 to build an ADU that's 1,200 square feet if I'm only going to get $1,200 a month for it on a short-term rental lease. But with that being said, if it were a long-term rental lease, if it were a short-term rental, I may be able to yield higher profits, turn a profit on it, which is really what I'm after as an investor. And at some point, maybe it would become a long-term rental, but to kind of not allow new structures to be short-term rentals, it just makes it difficult, you know, and then you go back into this piece of the rental stock that we have isn't necessarily growing. So I would just ask you to have a forward view on that, maybe plan 5 to 10 years out. I know this is maybe a new idea, but it's something that I've considered, something I've talked to Lisa DeNoyer about. And yeah, I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Housing stock is growing. Within the next 2 years, I figure we're going to have 280 more units with Maple Block, with lofts, etc. I'll let you know. Anyone else wishes to speak to council at this time? Anyone online? I noticed there that role.
So I'm just clarifying your motion. So it's 40 total STRs. Is this only for 2024? Or how do you want me to say this? Setting a limit of 40 STRs with 33 existing and 7 new licenses pending the April, whatever date that is, the second meeting in April, because we don't have the first one? Or is it all of 24?
Mr. Moore.
I apologize. I omitted saying for 2025, 40 total as well.
Okay, so it is what is being proposed, like the resolution suggested.
Yep.
Okay.
Do you second that motion, Mr. Wagner? Okay. So it
So
clarifies.
thank you. So roll call. Demore? Aye. Wagner?
Yeah.
Shields?
No.
Sorry, I'm just making note. Walker?
No.
And Murphy?
Yes. Motion passes 3-2. Next on the agenda is adoption of a proposed resolution that would authorize contracting with Harbor Springs excavating Harbor Springs, the amount of $465,114.45 for the Bayview Avenue full reconstruction. Turn it over to Mike Robbins, our Public Works Director.
Okay, I'll have Sarah bring up a PowerPoint briefly just to kind of talk about each project.
Okay.
So there's 4 projects on the list tonight to go over for approval. And we've been working on this actually from last year. We went out for bid in the fall, opened bids in December. And we're here to get the approvals to move forward. So the first project is the Bayview Avenue reconstruct. The 2024 budget and CIP allocated $566,800. This project was driven not only by the condition of the street, but we're adding a water main loop because we're having some water quality issues. I went over this through the CIP, but with this project, there will be a loop that will tie it to the Lincoln Place water system, which is the city's. We'll have some new curb and gutters, new pavement, and a sidewalk addition that will be on the west side of Bayview Avenue, taking the sidewalk to the top of the hill, go to Winter Sports Park.
You can keep going.
Benchmark Engineering did the bid documents with city staff. We made the bids available November 20th. I believe there were 8 firms that were notified. We sent out an advertisement and we received 4 bids. Low bid was Harbor Springs Excavating for $465,114.45. I won't read the other 3, but very competitive on the top 3, I would say. There are additional costs that are on top of this bid. The concrete, which I'll be going over later for unit cost for approval, is estimated at $68,874. Construction for this project is going to begin in the spring, early spring, as soon as we can get equipment and people moving. April 1st, we're hoping, with a completion by late June. And I'll get into some of the scheduling, how it all ties in with the other projects as I move along here. So staff is recommending contracting with Harbor Springs Excavating of Harbor Springs for this contract based on their bid price.
Do I have a motion
No, I have a question.
or question?
Question.
So just for clarity purposes, first of all, thank you for the map.
Oh, you're welcome.
Appreciate that visual. It's helpful. And it says under costs that, you know, the installation of curb, gutter, sidewalk are not included with the Harbor Springs Excavating contract amount. It wasn't included with any of the bids, right?
That's
For the other
correct.
people as well. Okay.
Yep.
And then maybe now, or maybe you're going to explain this, but just for the benefit of constituents, can you at some point explain why it's preferable to bump that out? I know you've explained it to us before,
Yep.
but
I'll go over that.
thank you.
Yep.
You need a motion though, don't you?
I need a motion. I'm going to take each project individually.
Ms. Walker,
Mayor, I'd be happy to make a motion to accept Harbor Springs Excavating as the lowest bid for the scope of this work.
Support.
I have a motion from Ms. DeBoer, a second from motion from Ms. Walker and a second from Ms. DeBoer. Any other discussion? I go to city clerk back for roll.
Walker. Yes. Moore.
Aye.
Shield.
Yes.
Wagner.
Yes.
Murphy.
Yes. Back to you, Mike.
Okay, moving along, we'll go to the second slide, which is relative to the 2024 street resurfacing project. The 2024 budget and CIP allocated $429,200 for street resurfacing. These streets include Rose Street, which will begin at Clinton and head east towards the Winter Sports Park and tie to Winter Park Lane. Winter Park Lane will start approximately at Arlington Grand Avenue at the intersection there and go to the Rose Street Winter Sports Park entrance. Balsam is just off of Arlington Avenue, just before you get into Bayview. There's a little short segment with a couple of apartment buildings there that kind of takes you the back way into the hospice facility there. So those are the 3 street resurfacing projects. And I'm just going to mention the scope of work, that this is not a mill and fill. And I know we use that term a lot with these fixes on these streets. But these 3 streets warrant removing the surface and upgrading the subgrades. So we'll be adding gravel to the subgrades, doing some reshaping. and putting 2-course paving back on that street. So it's not removing 2 inches, adding 2 inches. We're gonna remove what's there, which is single course. We're gonna update some, or upgrade the subgrades, and we're putting 2-course paving back. So there'll be a base course and a top course, which will give those streets life for 15 to 20 years. I threw in the comment about the street assessment utilizing the PACER system, which is pavement surface evaluation and rating. And I mention this because it's only looking at the surface of the asphalt. It's not looking at the curbs. It's not looking at any of the infrastructure. So it's a visual inspection that we perform in-house with Jason Fate, our engineer, and he rates the streets based on the PACER ratings. And there is a set of guidelines that are followed when he rates those streets. And we use those ratings for grants, talking with the state. The state comes through the city once a year and looks at our ratings. So they're looking at cracks, rutting, settling, and that those all are characteristics of how the ratings are established. It's very helpful in planning because that's the industry standard. But there's other considerations when we are with these PACER people from MDOT and others, that we have water mains, storm sewers, sanitary, curbs, electric, that all fit in-house when we get together and discuss projects. So it's a very helpful tool. There's a map that I enclosed in your packet that kind of gives you a general idea of what the city looks like from a PACER rating, not so much from an infrastructure standpoint. So that being said, I just gave you some background on kind of a guideline of what we use. Benchmark Engineering prepared the bid documents. We made this packet available on November 20th. 8 firms were notified. We received 3 bids, which isn't surprising. This is asphalt, street building versus water mains and sanitary and storm. So we received the low bid was Reeve Riley Construction out of Charlevoix, $278,737.70. EF Wilkinson was not too far out, but they did our Bridge Street project last year. Did an excellent job. We were glad that they did it. And Tri-County has done multiple projects in the city. The additional cost, the concrete is estimated at $52,986, plus the contingencies. And the reason I mentioned contingencies is because we look at bids and then we look at what we allocated. It's not only concrete, but it's construction engineering, it's inspection, it's contract documents. All of those come into play for the contingencies. So we have a contractor, but then there's other things that we do with these contracts to ensure that the work gets done properly with inspection and engineering. If we run into problems, we have money set aside for that. Restorations, we do a lot of our own restorations on these projects. So I'll get into the concrete additions here in the next agenda item. The construction for this project is to also begin in early spring. It won't start as early as April because we don't expect asphalt plants to open until May. Winter keeps up like it is, maybe they'll open in April, but I have not seen that in my lifetime. So if we can get the asphalt plants open in May, these are quick projects. They're removal and we basically put them back. I will make a comment on Rose Street. If you drive that, you'll notice that the curb on the north side of the street is tipped back. And that curb is going to be all replaced on the north side. In fact, we're going to narrow the street by a foot or two to get that curb up on some solid ground, but you'll notice that it's tipped back. So construction schedule, I just went over that. We're expecting that to be done by late June is where the contract documents. Our goal was by July 4th. And staff recommends contracting with Ruth Riley Construction out of Charlevoix. And I'll take any questions if there are any.
Questions? Possible motion if no questions. Questions?
Thank you for the map.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Comments, questions?
I'll make a motion to approve the authorization of contracting with Reeve Riley.
Thank you. Anyone, Ms. Walker?
I'll second the motion, Mayor.
I have a motion from Mr. Shields and a second from Ms. Walker. Any other discussion? We're going to Sarah back for roll.
Shields.
Yes.
Walker.
Yes.
Demore.
Aye.
Wagner.
Yes.
Murphy.
Yes. Carry on to number 3.
Number 3, concrete unit price bids. We started doing this years ago at the city, and I'll go down through my list here and get into some of the other reasons that we do it. But these concrete unit price bids are tied to the Bayview Avenue reconstruct in the 2024 street resurfacing project. So when we go out for bids, we sent 25 unit line items to 4 pre-qualified concrete contractors that have worked in the city. When I say they're pre-qualified, they turn in pre-qualifications to our engineering where we look at their experience in doing concrete work. It's critical work. It's got to be right, and they have to meet our schedules. So when we go out for these unit bid on these 25 line items, we use these bids for not only our construction projects, but for as needed repairs also. So we have emergency water, sanitary sewer, storm sewer, electric repairs. We're leaning on these contractors at these fixed costs to work with us to get these repairs made. We do citywide spot repairs, including work within the central business district. So any sidewalk, and we've already got a list going. We've dealt with a couple of homeowners already on sidewalk repairs. These contractors, when they're available to meet our schedule, will use to do these repairs. We're going to do the southeast corner of Howard and East Mitchell, JCPenney corner. We're going to remove the tracks. I went over that in the CIP, that we're removing those concrete or the rails that are in that sidewalk diagonal crossing across Howard Street and that intersection. We will be using our own crews. We'll be using contracted services to help do the removals and the preps, but we'll lean on one of these contractors to do the concrete work. And we'll make it fit the schedule in the central business district. We use this because we've had experiences where low bid sometimes comes in with a contractor for concrete that may not be from the area. And we're not excluding those folks. We just ask them to bid these unit costs. We've had experience where we've had a street ready to go for curb and a concrete crew is 2 weeks out and the project sits. So we pre-qualify our concrete crews and we let them know what our schedule is and we ask that they meet that schedule. The contractor that's building the street is obligated through the contract to do all the prep work for that concrete. So we have coordinated those two efforts where early on when we started doing this, it was, well, I'm not supposed to grade this. The concrete crew shows up and says, we have issues. So we've married the contracts together. So that's why we use these unit costs. It speeds our projects up and we know the quality of work that we're going to receive. And it's critical.
Question. Is that it? You got more on this one.
That's all I have.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Cold weather concrete, how much of that do we use?
We use it, if we had a break today in a street, we would use cold weather concrete versus asphalt. So we would put that, it's got a chloride in it, but we use that as what we call sacrificial repair. We will tear it out in the spring and put asphalt back.
That's why the $28 to the $4 you saw that.
You got it.
Yeah.
Yep. And it's because it's the size. It's normally just a patch. It's not doing a block of sidewalk.
So they come in and do a very small amount. Which
Correct.
can be redone or corrected or whatever.
That's correct.
Okay. Ms. Walker.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mike Robbins, for your presentation. I did notice in regards to the last bidders that Ryan Brothers, ranked number one, bid on everything that was requested, but the other did not. Do you have a sense of why somebody would do one or fill up the entire bid spec and then the other would not?
The other contractor doesn't have curb people. Curb is a little bit unique, and there's only certain crews that can build concrete curb.
Thank you.
Yep.
Do I have a possible motion or other discussions, questions?
I'll make a motion to approve authorizing the contracts of the various bidders with at city staff's discretion.
Support.
I have a motion from Mr. Wagner and a second from Ms. Demore. Any other discussion? I go to Sarah Beck for roll.
Wagner.
Yes.
Demore.
Aye.
Shields.
Yes.
Walker. Yes. Murphy.
Yes, motion passes 5-0. Last one.
Last one, MDOT Small Urban Program contract. This is a contract with MDOT. 2024 budget and CIP allocated $385,963 for resurfacing of East Mitchell. This is a true mill and fill project. We are taking 2 inches off of that street, starting at Division Street and going to the city limits at just east of Bayview. I'll get into the partnership here in a minute to extend this project. We are going to be removing the concrete crosswalks. If you'll drive Mitchell today, you'll notice that the crosswalks are all concrete. They aren't real visible. There is a heave in those sidewalks, normally in the spring, and some of them last all summer. So we're going to remove those, put asphalt back, and then when the mill comes through, it'll be a smooth surface. And then we'll be adjusting utility structures. There's a couple of manholes east of Kalamazoo that have a drop. When we did the project in 2008, there's some settlement there. The Small Urban Program is it's an MDOT administers the construction contract. We do not hold the contract. We use this format with Small Urban for years. We did East Mitchell in 2008 with Small Urban money. We gobbled up 2 years of funding and did it in 1 year. We did State Street in 2022, same contract with MDOT. We did Sheridan, Emmett, Jennings, Arlington. This money comes available every couple of years. There's a task force that's formed in the area between Emmett County Road Commission, the city, and the friendship centers of Emmett County. And with that task force, there are certain streets that are eligible, and we tend to move the money back and forth between each jurisdiction. With this partnership with Emmett County Road Commission, the Road Commission in the city and the friendship centers of Emmett County, through our task force meetings with MDOT, suggested if we could get funding to do all of Mitchell, from Division Street to Division Road. It's a very unique project, but it's done. It's been a little complicated on the bid documents, but essentially there is one bid that was let and will be awarded by MDOT for 2 jurisdictions with 2 separate agreements. So we hold the agreement that was in your packet that describes the cost and the estimated cost on the city's behalf. The county road commission will have to execute a similar agreement. Both agreements have to be approved for this project to move forward. So we both have the agreements. I believe they're taking theirs to the road commission board on Friday, the 12th. But we're pretty confident things will move forward. It's a great project. So just as the project leaves Petoskey, it's going to Division Road under the jurisdiction of the county. The scheduling detour, this is going to be a little bit of a challenge, but we've been through it before. The project is not going to begin until school is out. So we are not going to be dealing with the school traffic. It has to be substantially complete by July 1st. So if you look at the middle of June 10th, by July 1st, with total completion by July 12th. It has been broken into 3 phases. We're going to start at Division Street and work our way east and get through the Kalamazoo, East Mitchell intersection. That's the first phase. And there's a date that's associated with that, but it's all within this July 1st date. So when this mill shows up, they're gonna run the mill up the street. Get to that, through that intersection, we're gonna have a detour set up with the county. That's gonna direct traffic out at Division Road to Atkins. And bring them into the city via Atkins Extension. Which will turn them into Sheridan, which will turn them into Howard, if they want to come into the city. There'll also be signage where we'll allow local traffic. In local traffic, when I use the term local traffic, it's the residents that live along the street will have access. We'll work with them as far as when the mill is there, it's just a mill that goes by, they can have the street back. And then it has to be paved, which we've all been through that. But we expect that there will be some traffic that will use Hill Street as a detour. And that traffic is going to use Hill Street and then turn and use State Street to get to Waukezu. The eastbound traffic will be using Waukezu and using State Street in order to get to Hill Street. Or if we're done with the intersection and we can turn them and let them go out East Mitchell, we will. That's why I call it a phased approach detour. So we gave our input to MDOT, what we would like to see. The county gave their input. We all agreed if the trucks and the folks that just aren't interested in getting to Petoskey, but maybe the highway, let them take Atkins Road Extension and divert away from us. So there's going to be a multiple phased approach, but we'll be moving signs based on where that mill is located. Again, we're all trying to get them out of town by the end of June, or by the end of June, July 1st, with final completion the 12th.
Okay. Do I have a motion or questions? Ms. Walker?
Thank you, Mayor. I did have a question. Mike, is the reason that you have the agreement is between MDOT and the road commission versus Bear Creek Township is because Bear Creek Township doesn't have its own authority, it just automatically goes to the road commission?
The commission has the authority of the streets, of the roads, and they are working with Bear Creek Township for funding.
Okay.
So, but it's the jurisdiction is the Emmett County Road Commission.
Got it. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Mr. Moore.
So Mike, just point of clarification, as I understand this, that it's MDOT that seeks the bids and awards the contract, but is it done to our specs then?
It is. It's an MDOT. We use a lot of the MDOT specs.
Yeah.
So yes, the two are in sync.
And then since our costs are projected, what happens there if there are more? I mean, how does that work? Are we approving as it goes if it's more or?
You are. And the way that this is set up, actually, they had the bid opening last Friday. They've released the bid, which the bid is within the budget. You know that. We just don't know how it's been divvied up. So that they're going to take the unit cost and because it's one contract, and they'll divvy up. These numbers that are before you that are in that contract with MDOT are pre-established by the engineers. They're based on the estimates. The only way that this would be rebid by MDOT if it was 10% if it was 10% over the projected. It's not 10% over, but we don't know who and what side is going to be, what the numbers truly are. So with our budget, $385,000, we allocated $150,000 from the city to partner with MDOT at their $235,000. So we've got some contingency money built into it. It's money we can't pass up, obviously, but we're hoping. And if you recall, I believe State Street was marginal as far as costs. Costs were going up. We still made it work, but we used some of the contingencies to get it done. But that's, yes, you are, because it is estimated in the agreement and in the resolution. I believe I did use the word estimated.
So resolution doesn't reference our estimated portion, but it references the contract, which has the estimated portion in it.
Okay. But yeah, that's what we are doing.
Thank you.
Yep.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Motion from Mr. Shields and a second from Mr. Wagner. A motion from Mr. Shields, second from Mr. Wagner. Any other discussion? I go to city Bedford roll.
Shields,
Yes.
Wagner.
Yes.
Demore.
Aye.
Walker. Yes. Murphy.
Yes, motion passes. All four of those 5-0. Mike, thank you for your work for the city.
Everybody for your support. It's
Great, and working with interagencies to make this happen as well. That saves the city money as well as it's great establishing good relationships because it's not just with the roads, but everything else. So thank you again.
Thank you.
That being said, city council comments, and I'll start with Ms. Walker, Ward 4. Y'all. Red, green.
City council comments, yes. I think I had something to say. Yes, would you please come back to me? Thank you, Mary.
Let's go to Ward 2, Mr. Shields.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to thank this body for taking the time to handle the presenters and the comments about deer issues in the city last year. And with the city of Charlevoix recently approving a deer call and having some more constituents in Ward 2 informing about continuing deer issues, I want to just again make a comment about my desire to continue to evaluate the situation in the city of Charlevoix. I learned that, well, one, from just the news reports that it was overall well received. The deer call was well received in the community. Of course, there was multiple perspectives, but overall it was well received, and that the deer issues were prevalent in one ward of the community, which I think is kind of similar here. Definitely Ward 2 has, as far as I know, been getting a lot of the issues. So that just reinforced my desire to continue to represent those in my ward who are concerned about their issues. And I think from our presenters, they did a great job presenting on the benefits to the environment, to economics, to human health, and even to the humanity of the deer, and their own starvation and how a call could be beneficial. So one thing that the city of Charlevoix did was posted on their city website, had an opportunity for people to make comments and report about the complaints about deer issues and the problems they've been having with deer. So I'm wondering if that is something that we could start with here, is a separate little link on the website for people to make comments. Someplace I could submit, or I could suggest people go when they contact me and they have an issue with deer. Hey, go to the website and make a comment, and we could collect those, and we can start to see if this is a relevant concern that we want to do more with.
Ward 4.
That would be me.
Yes.
Thank you, Mayor. Over the course of the last month, I had the opportunity to sit in on a planning commission meeting, and I just want to encourage all residents of the city of Petoskey to attend any meeting that you are so inspired to participate and civically engage. The necessity of democracy in our city to have people feel comfortable going to public meetings and even taking the time to show up at a public meeting, I think is always very commendable. And as a person that's an elected body here in this city, I always want to encourage people to show up and to participate. And I think it takes a lot of courage for people to show up at public meetings, and even more courage to speak. So there should never be an air or a feeling that you are not welcome at a public meeting. I experienced that recently, and it just made me want to double down and show up at every meeting. And also let other people know that public meetings are public meetings, and engagement and civic engagement is of the highest priority for me as an elected person, and for me as a child that grew up in this community and that is living in 4 generations in this community, and want to encourage everybody to always feel like they are welcome at a public meeting. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Wagner?
Thank you. A couple comments. One is it's always difficult hearing some of the challenges that we hear at public meetings and elsewhere that it's difficult doing business with Petoskey. Things aren't clear. It's hard getting things approved. And what we don't hear is the other comments that things are getting better. And I've spoken with a couple developers in particular in the last year who've been very, very complimentary of Shane and Mike and staff. That they've been really great to work with. So I think it's really important to state that. The other thing is New Year's Eve seems like a year ago already, but the Cricket Tree Arts Center library event that happened that several of us were part of was just outstanding again. And one of the highlights was in the library. Val Myers had greeted us and she said that a year prior they had video games for kids. Well, they shut them off. And my wife and I walked in, we walked to this back room, everybody was playing packed house, board games, checkers, chess, kind of good old fashioned, back to basics. And it was really, really great for me to see.
Mr. Moore.
I just want to begin by saying thank you to my constituents to giving me an opportunity to serve another term. I do consider this to be one of the highest forms of community service, and I'm appreciative of their support. It's also my honor to serve with this group of folks. I actually agree 100% with Lindsay on the importance of voice, that everyone, as long as they exercise their voice in a respectful manner, should do so. And I respect different opinions respectfully offered, and always will support everyone's opportunity to voice their perspective. Thank you.
And I guess I might as well add this. If you do attend public meetings, what I ask is that you don't cheerlead back there on city council of saying, oh, no, yeah, ooh. That's inappropriate because it starts to inject yourself into the discussion of a comment by either council members or by the public. So if you have the opportunity and you are attending, please be quiet and allow the person that is speaking to have the floor, whether it be up here at council or out there. So just keep to yourself until it's your turn to speak. But there being no further business to come